Colorful text over images of past events. Logo, Illinois Cultural Accessibility Network. Professional Development Workshops. BIPOC Accessible Service Providers Part 2. Audio Describers. Split screen. At right, the presenting speaker. At left, an ASL interpreter signs.
Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Matt Lauterbach. I'm a white man in my 40s who uses he, him pronouns. I'm wearing glasses with a trim beard and a black shirt. I'm a filmmaker, educator, and accessibility activist, and I'm a proud member of the Chicago Cultural Accessibility Consortium, or CCAC. CCAC began as a volunteer group in 2013. It is a 501c3 organization whose mission is to empower cultural spaces to become more accessible to visitors with disabilities. We believe everyone deserves access to Chicago's rich arts and culture. CCAC facilitates a dynamic community of cultural administrators and people with disabilities to remove barriers in the region's cultural organizations. We organize professional development events like our panel today. We also provide organizations with equipment loans and an access calendar that lists accessible events and programs throughout the city of Chicago. Please refer to our website for more information and to check our other resources. One significant impact and outcome of our work is the creation of the Illinois Cultural Accessibility Network, or ICAN. ICAN is a statewide volunteer network with funding and support from the Illinois Arts Council Agency in recognition of the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. We acknowledge our service providers today, Pro Bono ASL and Efficiency Reporting. We also recognize that we are on Native lands, acknowledging the Council of the Three Fires, Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa, an alliance based on shared language, culture, and common history. The name Chicago is from the Algonquin language, Shikawa, striped skunk or onion. And now for a few housekeeping remarks. You can access captioning via CART transcription during this program. Just click on the live transcript button in the Zoom menu. If you prefer to open the transcript in a separate browser page, please use the stream text link that can be found in the chat. ASL interpretation for today's event is being provided by Pro Bono ASL. Our interpreters are Susan Pacheco Correa and Marianne Gutierrez. Our captioner is Leanne Hibbler from Efficiency Reporting. As our conversation gets started, we encourage you to use the Q&A feature in your Zoom menu to submit questions throughout the event. So that's the Q&A button, not the chat button. We'd love to reserve the chat feature for some more targeted information, like announcements or links from CCAC. Chat can absolutely also be used if you have issues with accessibility. Please don't hesitate to reach out to our support team using the chat function. If you use a screen reader and you would like to turn off the chat functionality, you can do so in Zoom's settings. We will now start with a brief introduction of our guests, followed by a dynamic panel discussion and a live Q&A. The esteemed Thomas Reid will be serving as our moderator today, and he will be joined by Nefertiti, Matos Olivares, and Ashleigh Braggs. Thomas, you now have the floor.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate that. And good afternoon and welcome, everyone. And I want to send a big shout out and thanks to the CCAC for hosting this event and highlighting this topic of BIPOC professional AD professionals, that is. I'm really excited to be in conversation here today with what I'm going to go ahead and say two superstars. So, but before we get to them, we're going to kick this off with a brief introduction of ourselves, along with a bit about our entry into the world of audio description. So I'll set it off. So my name is Thomas Reid, and I'm a brown-skinned Black man with a smooth shaving bald head, and a full neat beard. I'm rocking shades with a black button-up shirt, and I'm currently in my vocal booth in my home in the Poconos, which is in Northeast Pennsylvania, the original land of the Lenape. And by the way, it's only 90 minutes from the place that I always call home, and that's the Bronx, New York. Just need to say that. I'm a freelance audio producer, a voice talent, a writer, audio description narrator, consultant, advocate, and consumer. Oof. I host and produce a podcast called Read My Mind Radio, where I bring you compelling people impacted by all degrees of blindness and disability. And over the years, I've dedicated several episodes to the topic of audio description. And today you'll find those under the series name, Flipping the Script on Audio Description. That's where we go beyond the mainstream conversation and explore the wider implications of AD that impact the community. And in terms of how I got started, in fact, it's my podcast that really got me started in audio description. It's what led me to meet my friend and colleague who gave me my start, Cheryl Green. And it was a project that we voiced together for Kinetic Light. Meanwhile, when I sought advice on how to get started from in narration from some prominent people within the industry, I was dissuaded. I was told the process required sight. And if I didn't mention it, I am a man adjusting to becoming blind as an adult. In 2020, the process had to change, y'all, for everyone due to the pandemic. And I sent a shout out to Eric Wickstrom from IDC. He was interested in hiring blind talent. He also happened to listen to the podcast, and he liked my work and he liked my voice, and we made it happen. And even better, today, it helped lead to him having double-digit blind and low vision narrators on his roster. So I'm really excited about that, as well as that other companies are getting on board, and hopefully that all of that will continue. So next up, our first superstar, I'd like Ashleigh to tell you a little bit about herself.
2 screens appear below Thomas in the ASL interpreter. At left, Ashleigh. At right, Nefertiti.
Good afternoon, everyone. I also want to say thank you for everyone who's helped put this event together. I said it's been such a pleasure preparing for it. So I'm very excited to be here and to present with our fantastic moderator and my fantastic co-panelist. My name is Ashleigh, as been said. For anyone documenting this, my first name is spelled A-S-H-L-E-I-G-H. I once was described as a CCAC super user, so hopefully there are 1 or 2 people out there who know me. Hi, and hopefully I'll be back to getting my status as a super user shortly. To describe myself, I am a Black woman with dark brown skin. I have Afro-textured hair, and today it is pulled back a little bit off my face with a light blue headband. I'm wearing a dark pink sweater while I still can wear a sweater, and I'm sitting on a couch. There's a pillow behind me, and there's also some Black artwork, a mask and a painting. I'm depending on what angle I'm moving around at. During this presentation, you might see a sibling of mine walking behind me on the couch. We have the same mother. He was adopted maybe about 10 years ago. He has dark fur. His name is Teensy. So I told him I was doing something, but you know how younger siblings are. I am an audio describer. I've also trained audio describers. I mostly focus on cultural spaces, live theater, and dance, but I have done some video and I would like to do some more. I started describing as part of an effort. I don't know if we can count it as several years ago or many years ago, somewhere in that timeline, at my primary organization of employment to make our experiences overall more accessible. I did several trainings on audio description, and as I mentioned, trained other audio describers. Eventually, I piloted some described experiences, including a tour and 2 of our live staple presentations. But as I listened to more audio described content, I would notice that in other places, I would notice that the choices that the describer made seem to erase or minimize people of color, especially Black people. And so I started thinking about the best ways to bring color and culture to described experiences, which is why I'm very excited to be here and to discuss this topic with you today.
Awesome. Nefertiti.
Yes, Thomas, you are such a motivating force. I want to respond to everything you've said. Well, hello, good afternoon. I'm Nefertiti Matos Olivares. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a blind person who lives with chronic illness. If you're hearing those sirens in my background, I am in New York City. In Manhattan, though, not Bronx. Sorry, Thomas, though I love the boogie down.
Of course you do.
Let's see. My description is that I am a light brown skin woman with brown hair and brown eyes. I am not, you can't see my hair today. I'm rocking this little burgundy hat. I just have felt like wearing it all day, and so that's what you get. And my background is blurred, so there's nothing else really to see here. Let's see. Well, my experience and my story, my history with audio description is that I am a longtime consumer or fan of audio description. And about a year ago, I decided that I wanted to join the art and become a professional in this space. My background is in assistive technology, and I was feeling a little burned out on that. And the pandemic sort of brought into stark relief that I wanted to change. And I decided to, excuse me, enroll in a voiceover academy. And I took a couple of training courses specific to audio description. And I had the very good fortune of meeting Mr. Thomas Reid. He talked to you about the dynamo Cheryl Green. Well, Thomas is my dynamo. So he's my mentor in all of this. And he basically told me right from the start, if you want to do this, go ahead. But if you don't, it's okay. You're not obligated. There's no pressure. Just let me know what you want to do. And I explored it all the more. Because it's let me just say, and hopefully I'm not digressing too much, but it's not just you have a nice voice and you can read copy. You also need to know, digital audio interfaces and things like that, which was an aspect of this whole thing that was very intimidating to me. But Thomas was very encouraging, and other blind people were also very encouraging. And so I learned a bunch. And since then, I have described so many things, and I'm part of a great collective called Social Audio Description, with a wonderful group of people who are themselves disabled, people of color on the LGBT spectrum. And so it's like people doing it for themselves, right? People who didn't traditionally find spaces welcoming, shall we say, and we decided to come together and do something as a collective. And it's one of the best things I've ever done for myself. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Awesome. So my assumption is that those here today probably know what audio description is. You know that it's in its basic form, it's a way to verbally provide information about what's taking place on screen, on stage, in a venue, right? Somewhere where there's visual information and there's no other translation, if you will. We're fortunate to have representation from both live theater and broadcast today. So what I want to do is to just have Ashleigh talk a little bit about the workflow and the different roles that are involved in producing audio description in live spaces.
Sure. So I would say that one of the things I think that came up in our conversation as we were preparing for this presentation was the idea that the writing and the producing and the voicing of the description is all kind of inextricably linked. So I know that in other forms of audio description, it doesn't necessarily work that way. So when I talk about it, I just want to point out that when I'm doing it, I'm the person who's writing, I'm the person who's writing it, I'm the person who's voicing it, I'm the person who's kind of making most of the decisions about what the audio description is going to be. So the type of description I started doing doesn't focus as much on race and culture. I said, but I did want to just bring up for those of us who are like at aquariums and zoos and science centers, that we still want to be kind of thoughtful about that. So we can talk about that a little bit later. There are always going to be people that you're going to need to describe us at some point. I would say that in terms of the live space, I think that there are always going to be those tenets that apply everywhere. You're going to be making decisions about what you leave in as much as what you leave out. So you just really want to be careful not to inadvertently erase people, I said, by not mentioning that they're there. And so, yeah.
Okay, cool. Nefertiti, you want to talk about it from the perspective of, broadcast, film, streaming? Just what's the process, the workflow look like there?
Yeah, quite briefly, whereas someone like Ashleigh is writer and narrator, when it comes to films and TV shows, streaming services, etc., it's usually broken down into, I would say, 4 main roles. The writer does the writing, then the QC comes in and makes sure that that script is tightened up, makes sense to a blind person. Full disclosure, I am firmly in the camp of blind people should be the folks who are doing the quality control work. And then you have a narrator. So this person gets the final script, voices it, and then you have the audio editor or the engineer. And that's the person who very skillfully makes sure that the narration is where it should be and that audio levels are all even and all that. So yeah, as far as workflow, if I'm the writer of something, then that's really all I am for that project. Or if I'm the QC or if I'm the narrator, I'm getting more and more projects where I'm very fortunate to have multiple roles, including project lead. So it's becoming a bit more sort of multifaceted, but typically writer writes, the narrator narrates, and so on.
Very cool, very cool. So whether we're talking about on stage or screen, there are common components to producing audio description, right? So the writing, again, the narration, quality control, decision-making, which is those who hire folks, right? So this is how we want to organize our conversation this afternoon. So we'll begin with the script, which is the main factor, okay, in creating good audio description. It has to be clear, concise, create an image for the consumer that informs them about what's taking place on stage, on screen. So Ashleigh, I'd like you to describe the added value that Black and Brown and people of color in general bring to that process, the process of writing that script. And feel free to share any specific examples from your experience.
Sure, there's so much value that writers of color, describers of color bring, especially when the artwork is Black in nature. So I think that there are many opportunities. I said that when I train describers, I talk about how what you describe is about what you leave in, but it's also about what you leave out, and choosing which of those details are important, I think just really can bring a lot to adding to your understanding of what that artwork is or what that presentation is. So there is things about skin color and skin tone and hairstyle and hair type, and all of these are really deliberate choices that are made as when you're watching a performance. especially when you're talking about something that's scripted, like a play or even a dance performance. And so you want to make sure that you're bringing those things into your listeners' attention so that they realize that they're there and so they can have a full picture of what's going on. A lot of times when I listen to audio description, I feel like you wouldn't necessarily even know that someone was Black if you weren't, and I wasn't also watching it and could see that for myself. So I just think that there are often details that I feel like another describer wouldn't necessarily choose to include. So for example, I was asked to describe a play once where the main character was a character, I think was a main character, was wearing a hair bonnet that Black women usually use when they sleep, but she was wearing it outside in her backyard in the middle of the day. And so I really felt like that, including that detail that I don't know another describer would necessarily choose to include, as I felt like it really told me something, and I think it's telling something about the character that I think another describer might miss. So again, back to the example of hair, I think that I often feel like things get, I don't want to say sanitized because we don't need sanitizing, but I think get whitewashed or left out. So sometimes I'll be listening to another describer describe a Black person, and they'll describe them as having curly hair instead of having coily hair, which again would lead someone to understand that they're Black. Or they might mention that they have braids instead of cornrows or some other type of hairstyle, again, that's worn by Black people. I described a play where one of the main characters wore her hair very natural. I think she wore like a 2-strand twist, which for those of us, those of you who are not inundated, I said it's a hairstyle where you kind of take sections of hair, you twist them together, and you kind of leave it for a while, let it set, and then you untwist it. And then you have like little crinkles all over your hair. It's very beautiful for women, who are not me, who can pull this hairstyle off. But I said, I just feel like bringing in those details. I said, even just being very binary, a woman who wears her hair natural versus a woman who wears her hair straight, it just says something about that character and how they see themselves and how they see themselves in the world. And so when I was describing this particular play, I'm being able to go back and ask the house manager, person who hired me, like, hey, I have a little bit more information, because I always want to make sure we're not introducing mistakes in our own information, but it looked like a 2-strand twist to me. So I was able to go back and say, hey, is this a 2-strand twist? And then the person managing me was like, yeah, I asked about this for you, and it is in fact a 2-strand twist. So then I was able to bring that information to the listener.
Very cool. Very cool. And at any point, if when we're kind of going back and forth, Nefertiti, in this case, if there's any sort of response that you wanna make, just feel free. But I'll ask you the question first. So if there's anything that you wanted to add, feel free to do that. But so you, Nefertiti, were the writer on a very unique project that I think has some racial elements sort of built right in. Can you talk about that process, both from the perspective of a blind and Latina AD professional?
Yes. Wow. Well, just like the subject of Black hair is quite fraught, so too is the subject of a blind person actually writing audio description. I was somebody who was hired very early on in my career in this space to write the script for a documentary all about George Floyd. It's called 5 Days for George Floyd, or excuse me, Say His Name, 5 Days for George Floyd. So not only was this an experience that was blowing a lot of people's minds, like what a blind person is writing, but then there was the very heavy subject matter of George Floyd and his murder, and just the cultural implications and all of that, again, that weight and that heaviness. So I felt very privileged to have been given this opportunity. But it was something that weighed on me, the responsibility, because as someone who, unlike Thomas, didn't go blind as an adult, I've been blind basically since I was 3 years old. So I don't really know any better. And unless it is specifically like said to me and articulated to me, this person is Black, or, their hair is like this, or excuse me, their body's like that, I don't really know these details. I didn't grow up with audio description. I grew up with a family who's, you know, immigrated to this country. I'm first generation American, and a lot of the stuff that I have figured out for myself has come as a result of tapping into the blindness community and having other people teach me who have been doing this longer, you know, or who are on the same journey. My family struggled to sort of assimilate with this country, much less deal with a blind kid. Not that they weren't supportive, but you know, they had their limitations. And so I did not grow up with audio description. I did not grow up with the vocabulary for different skin tones and things like that. And so fast forward to this project, and it hit me squarely in the face that like, there was so much that, yes, you would hear it on the news about George Floyd and this person got murdered and that police, you know, person was hurt and all this stuff, but never in the context of what does this actually mean? How can I actually understand this as a blind person, color and all of that? And I had to come face to face with that reality when I was writing the script for this documentary. It taught me a lot about myself, and it taught me a lot about the internalized ableism that a lot of blind people have as well. I sort of expected sighted people to be sort of mind boggled, but blind people were just as critical and as doubtful as any sighted people were. So if I'm digressing too much, Thomas, reel me in. But you know, just it was an amazing experience. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about the culture that I've been living in practically all my life in this country. And I built some self-esteem behind it too, because it was like, if I was hired to do this job and I did a good job, then I can do this, and other blind people who are skilled writers can do this. And, you know, we being blind people can be part of every aspect of the audio description creation process. So
Sorry, Nefertiti, could you say that last part again, please?
blind people can be part of every aspect of the audio description process. We need to be.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mic drop. Do I have a mic around for someone? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. So earlier, I said that the script is the most important element, but we know that voice plays a major role as well. So Nefertiti, I'll keep you on the hot seat there. So last year, when the film In the Heights came out by Lin-Manuel Miranda, many AD consumers, including myself, were a bit upset by the choice of narrator. Can you explain what the issue was and share your thoughts?
Yes. Well, for anyone who doesn't know, In the Heights is a play turned film, written, thought of like the brainchild of Lin-Manuel Miranda, who you probably now know as, you know, Hamilton fame. But before Hamilton, there was In the Heights, and it's about this Dominican and Puerto Rican families here in New York City in a neighborhood called Washington Heights, where I grew up, incidentally. I'm Dominican myself. And it's just the pride of a community. So when the film came out and the audio describer, who has a lovely voice, by the way, and a beautifully smooth delivery, just wonderful at her narration craft. But this person is a white person. It just really, if you don't mind me saying, pissed a lot of people off. It was like, who made this decision? You know, where's the cultural competency when you are clearly dealing with subject matter and, you know, a film, again, that was once a play, that's just the pride of an entire community. And you assign this to somebody who is white. It just did not add up. And there was really no need for it, more to the point, because there are people of color in this space. You know, there are Latinos, Latinas in this space. So the casting was really off. We can mention the Black Panther situation as well, where this is a predominantly Black film, an all Black cast, and yet the person describing it was a British white man. Completely inappropriate and just not at all okay. So yes, that was the controversy, the mismatch, and how audio description is supposed to inform, not distract from the content. And in the case of In the Heights, it was a total distraction and something that really piqued the ire of a lot of people.
Could you talk about the distractions? Because specifically, I know when I watched it, what threw me, and that was the pronunciations of the words. And again, she's a very nice person, beautiful
Yes.
woman, but you know, I know how that felt for me growing up with a Puerto Rican mother, and so to hear Boricua as opposed to Boricua, you know, I mean, those for some people might seem small, but how did those types of things make you feel? Again, growing up in Washington Heights, Dominican yourself.
Yes, my first language is Spanish.
Mhm.
So I am very Dominican in spite of, you know, growing up here and dealing with a lot of like straddling that intersection of like the rugged individualism that Americans are really known for. And then that sort of, you know, we have to do everything together. Family is everything kind of communal lifestyle that I was leading at home. But just this emphasis growing up on speaking Spanish properly, pronouncing things the way you know they should be pronounced, and all this. And then again, you have this huge like phenomenon in the country and in the community that this Puerto Rican man has reached these heights, and he's got this film that featured Dominican people, and then we blind folk get this Americanized, we say gringonized version of words. It was disturbing and it did not feel good. It's not Boricua, it's Boricua, you know? It's Dominicano, somos gente dominicana, right? Like we are a proud people and we want representation, but I think that comes with a certain level of responsibility. And I think audio description is one of those spaces where we can do that, and we can broaden and need to broaden the scope and be better about keeping in mind what we're describing and who we are tasking, you know, with that responsibility.
Yeah. Ashleigh, based on your experience and general opinion, are narrators of color in general at risk of being typecasted? Because, you know, we're talking about, hey, we should be doing these projects where they are specific to a culture. Are we at risk of that? And is that a bad thing?
There's always a risk of
Yeah.
typecasting. I think no one wants to feel like, I think whatever ethnicity or culture you identify with, I think you always identify as being more than one thing. I said, you know, I'm Black, but I'm a lot of other things too. So of course, I enjoy being able to do projects where it's not necessarily about Blackness. But that being said, I think I'm still at a place in my own audio description journey where I appreciate being thought of for these types of projects. So I don't know that I'm personally feeling typecast at this point. I think that if you have plays or dance performances or whatever it is that involves Blackness, then you should be hiring me. Like who else would you hire? Like, I mean, unless you're going to hire Nefertiti here, you know, who else would it be? So on one hand, I feel we're at this point in my journey, I feel very much, I appreciate being thought of for those opportunities, and maybe up the road, maybe, you know, when I have done like 5 million Black plays and dance performances and movies, I said, I'll be tired of it, but today I'm not. So I said, right now, it still feels good to be the person. I said, again, I think as we've discussed and as we're going to continue discussing, I think that there's so many opportunities for us to kind of bring those experiences to light in a way that maybe other people can't. So I would like to keep doing it, but I'm curious what Nefertiti thinks.
Oh,
Look
no,
forward to that.
absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, Ashleigh, you all the way, right? To do these things, because we know they're going to be done well, and they're going to be done with cultural competency at the forefront, and, you know, lived experience and all of that. If, like you say, and, you know, it comes down the pike that that's all you're doing, then I would be like, maybe there's something to that. But at least we know that it's a situation, they are projects that are fully immersive, right? That the audio description is being written and voiced, produced, etc., by somebody who is of the culture as well. So I think that's really important. And I hope you don't feel typecasted anytime soon, because we need you. There aren't enough of us. So
Although I look forward to the day when we have all that Black content. You said 5 million? That's a lot. I look forward to
wow, I
that.
know.
Yeah. So, Nefertiti, what about non-BIPOC AD professionals? You know, what role do you think these folks can play to help kind of increase representation?
A very powerful role, in my opinion, because these folks are the ones who can say no. These are the folks who can say, oh, wow, this is a film with Black and brown people, or specific to these folks. You know, I don't necessarily feel that I'm the most qualified to do this. In fact, my own lived experience, quite recently, as of a matter of weeks ago, I had a job come to me that had to do with Asian, specifically Chinese people. And it was a very heavy, very heavy subject matter. But, you know, in addition to that, I just didn't feel like I was the appropriate person. Surely there are Asian people in this field, maybe even specifically Chinese folks. And so I expressed that, and I turned the job down. And, you know, I could have used the money, and I love this work. So I would have thoroughly enjoyed voicing and narrating, but I just didn't feel like it was appropriate. I feel like there was somebody, there must be people out here who would be better suited to something like that. And so I turned it down, and I feel it was the right thing to do. And so if other folks in this space decide, hey, this isn't necessarily just about a job for me, right? What is it that you say, Thomas? Audio description is more than entertainment.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it's about access, and it's about fairness. And if there's only a couple of people at the top because of their celebrity status, or they've been doing this for years, or they're cited, you know, and they're getting all of the jobs, like, hey, that's good for you. But there are those of us out here who have a lot to offer as well. And there's a lot of us, well, excuse me, not a lot of us. There aren't enough of us yet. Hopefully that changes slowly but surely. But there are a number of us out here already who can bring so much to the table in a way that somebody without that lived experience and without that knowledge honestly can't. You know, I feel like this can really go beyond just being a job. This could be a space for advocating, a space for equalizing the playing field, leveling it out, a place where blind people can find employment, can literally find their voice, you know, through narration and writing, etc. So yes, the long and short of it is, not every job is for everyone. And if a job doesn't feel right to you, if you feel like there's someone else who's better suited, you know, don't buy into the myth of scarcity. There'll be something else for you.
Yeah, yeah. Makes me think of that ally word, huh?
Yes, thank you. I was struggling for that word. I'm like, yes,
Yeah.
allyship is
Yeah.
super important. This is a, you know, audio description is a human right, I think, because it falls on the spectrum of accessibility, which is a human right. And so why not let it be something that is accessible to everyone, including employment, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. Um, you know, I kind of, I'm gonna make a little audible here because I wanna get your opinion, and this is really quick because you know we didn't talk about this, but I'm working on something, and I'm wondering what do y'all think about sort of a pledge that AD professionals would sign on to that would say, hey, look, we support this idea of cultural competence. Not only are we going to support it in our words, but we're going to support it in our actions and sign on to that, to commit to it. What do you think about that idea? Anyone? If I'm crazy, let me know I'm crazy. It's all
No,
good.
you're
I've been told that
brilliant.
before.
You are you are brilliant. I love this idea. Right away I think of like change.org or something like that. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, no, sign me up, and sign me up to recruit people to sign up for this, because we need that support in this space. People of color, you know, any marginalized group of folks, blind, LGBT, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But people of color in particular, I think we need that support, and we need those entry points, and we need space to be made for us by those who are already taking a lot of it up.
Ashley, you got any thoughts on that?
I think overall, I agree. I think everything Nefertiti said is right on point in terms of, I think when the job doesn't necessarily feel right to you, I said you definitely, especially I think in cases where it feels like, oh yeah, there definitely should be a Chinese person who can do this, especially as I think if you know one, even better. I guess my question about it is then, for example, I accepted a job. I guess as we're growing and knowing better and doing better, I accepted a job once to describe Aboriginal dance for an Aboriginal dance company. I said, the person who hired me for that job was on this call, so thank you. I still appreciate that job. But my question would be then, okay, I can turn that job down and say, please, and here in the city of Chicago, please find an Aboriginal audio describer. I said, I don't know that my question mark is then like, where's my responsibility? Like, do I help them find that person? Does that person exist? And then if that person does not exist, which I suspect, maybe at this point, you know, in the audio description journey that we're all on together, maybe they do not exist in this space in this time, then is it better for me to take that job as a person of color with some semblance of lived experience connected to that person than it would be for someone white or someone else who has literally no connection to it at all? So that's my only question about it. Like how do those things all line up together? I like that. So I like your idea in theory, but I want to sort of think more carefully about how it actually manifests itself in practice.
Yeah, who's closer? Who's closer to the subject?
Is that like maybe we have a chart?
Yeah, so you closer. You won. You got it. You're
a
okay.
little color spectrum. It's like, okay.
No, it's a great point. It is
a
a
very
great point.
good nuance. Yeah, it is nuanced, but I think on the face of it, it is absolutely brilliant. But I agree with you, Ashley. That's a brilliant point too. Oh,
Yeah.
I love smart people.
Yeah, this call is so fun. I love talking to the two of you.
Cool. So let's move to the next one, which is quality control. What's the process like in live theater? Who's involved?
Me.
Who's hired? Oh, you're the quality control?
I'm the quality control. I think
Wow.
for the most part, it's mostly me again. I think where I am, I think that I typically am hired by people who know me and kind of trust me, hopefully. I think that there have been a couple of cases where I might do some sample of description and show it to the person who's hired me to make sure that we're on the same page. But for the most part, It's just me previewing the performances. It's me making decisions about which details to include or not include. It's me delivering the description. So I think in terms of those types of quality control things, I said, again, like Nefertiti's talking about all these people. Sometimes I think it would be nice to have another person to talk things over with, but I think that just philosophically how I started in audio description, I was always a let's fly under the radar and I'll just do this thing and make my own decisions about it. I think that's just more philosophically who I am. So I have a few thoughts about quality control when it comes to this experience. So I'll let you come back to me so that Nefertiti can talk about how it works in her space.
Okay, well, even Neff, Neff, go ahead and respond, because I got a feeling I know where you're going. or you tell me, what does that make you think of when you hear that?
Yeah, so I'm sure that you're great at what you do, Ashleigh, but I wonder, because you're certainly not the only one. I know of a number of people here in New York City who are sort of a one-stop shop situation themselves. And I just wonder who's checking on that? Whose feedback are you getting to let you know that you're on the right path, that this actually made sense, or that maybe it could have been a little more clear here. I would want more of this type of detail. You're not going to get that from anybody but the blind person, right?
Absolutely.
So that's my only concern.
Absolutely.
That
absolutely makes sense.
And especially because, again, I've said this earlier, like I am firmly in camp audio description, quality control should be done by blind people, right? Who better than to know what makes sense to us than us type of situation. But again, if you are sort of the only one in this space doing this, then, I don't blame you at all. I wonder if maybe like the theater could take some responsibility and have little surveys sent out or something like that to help them and to help you in your craft as well, Ashleigh, to engage the audiences more. Because that is my only sort of reservation about all of this. How do you know that you're actually doing as good of a job as you can be?
Yeah, absolutely.
And want to be doing, right?
So what I also do is sometimes I chase theater goers and performing arts goers after the performance is over. So sometimes I will see them and kind of walk up to them and be like, hey, what did you think? So, which again, I think sometimes I've gotten some useful feedback that way. But also, I said to your point, Nefertiti, sometimes I think when I first started doing audio description, when I was piloting programs in the very beginning, we actually had an evaluation team that we worked with who interviewed. We would invite people to listen to our presentations and we would have people talk about, give their honest feedback without me being in the room, which is what I think is the most helpful. It's kind of weird for me to be like, hey, I just audio described your thing. Did you think it was good? Did you think it was bad? And so I think that it puts that person in an awkward position. I mean, sometimes people are like me and they don't have any problem telling me like, oh, that wasn't useful. But for the most part, I try to walk that balance with people. But even to, obviously, as I mentioned before, a lot of the audio description that I did in the beginning of my audio description journey wasn't focused on race or ethnicity very much, but just in terms of getting feedback, I don't know that I've gotten lots of feedback about lots of things, but I don't get a lot of like, oh, this could have been clearer, and maybe because it was fantastic and they didn't have any comments, but
probably.
To be honest, I said, sometimes I do wish I had someone who I knew was there to challenge me and be helpful. I said, I just find a lot of times, I think in the way that it's happened for me is I find that I'm kind of by myself. I would love someone, again, like if I had a Nefertiti in my life who could be like, Ashleigh, that's not it. But then I find the people who want to help me are usually like people who don't have more to offer than I do. So I've just been like, it's fine. I'll just do it by myself.
Yeah. So you need a Nefertiti in your life, y'all.
I mean,
so yeah, I mean, I think that really sort of highlights the difference there between the live space, right? That whole idea of one person sort of doing all of this, because it's not about you specifically, Ashleigh. It's just about that process, as opposed to the process in streaming and broadcast, which doesn't necessarily always exist. But Nefertiti, what's that process like there when a QC does exist? Because it doesn't always happen.
That's right. And I think that when it doesn't, it is obvious. But anyhow, when it does happen and it is done well, meaning that blind people are in these roles of quality control, the product sort of speaks for itself. And I'm associated with a number of companies in this space now as a narrator and as a quality control specialist and the like. And I'm very happy to say that more and more of these entities are realizing that quality control can and should be done by blind people. So basically, a script has its first draft. It is sent over to someone like me. I go through it, usually with the content that is being described. So I'll get like a video file and I'll get like a text file of the script. And I'm able to compare the two. I'm able to judge whether there's enough space for this line. I can, discern whether something is clear or not, whether the point is sort of missed, if words could be a bit more punchy, right? So often we're working with an economy of space in audio description. So can you make this a little shorter without sort of sacrificing the message, the information you're trying to convey? So things like that, very key things like that involve a little bit of editing here and there, suggestions, comments, questions, things like that. And then that gets sent back to the writer, and the writer does what they do. Hopefully they pay attention to what the QC person is telling them. And then once that script is finalized, that gets sent over to the narrator, and that's how it works.
Yeah. And so a couple of things, and we know that there's time, so there are some projects that probably can't have that much time in there. But a couple of things to point out when it comes to QC and hiring a blind person is that, still remember intersectionality, right? Not all blind people are the same. Shocking. And also when notice that I think we say hire blind people. Please don't expect blind folks to do that for free, because it is work. It's not just, hey, what do you think of this? And then go, like, that's it. No, there's work involved in that process when it's a true QC process. So pay the person.
Yes, otherwise it is exploitative,
Yeah.
and we are not about that anymore. Maybe once upon a time when it was like, oh, you're paying attention to me. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful.
Yeah.
Not anymore. Now it's like, all right, pay me. Value my work in a tangible way.
Yeah. So the other area that we didn't talk about that I mentioned, and I'm not sure about this one. Again, this is sort of just out there. But somebody hires people to do all of these things, and whether you're talking about live, whether you're talking about broadcast. And so I think it pretty much starts there. So in the live space, Ashleigh, who is that person, and are there people of color in these positions?
No. So usually, which is fine. I guess, for my own individual selfish purposes. So usually, I think everyone who's ever hired me for an audio description job, I think with maybe one exception, has been a white person, which again, I appreciate. Thank you. Some of those people are getting around this call. So, hey, how you doing? But I appreciate that in hiring me, that they recognize, in the cases, especially when they need me to describe something that's Black, that they recognize that that I have something that to bring to the process that they do not already have, that they're not reaching out. I said, especially in one case, I said, I know there are some theaters that work with a lot of describers. So it's like, oh, the fact that you thought of me, that you had the foresight to think of me for this is great. So yes, would it be nice to have, I think that there should be, wherever there are people making decisions about anything, there should be Black people there. But when there cannot be, I think the fact that we're having this conversation, and hopefully people going out and having those other conversations about, like someone who understands, if we're doing a presentation or performance around something that's Black, that someone who knows that historical and cultural context I was watching a Netflix show about, it was, anyone, I don't know if anyone on here will have seen this, but it was She's Gotta Have It, the Spike Lee series. And there was a painting, if you go, I wrote it down. That's why I'm making the point to say this now, because I was really proud of myself for finding the time code. But it's at 2951. If you go to the first episode of She's Gotta Have It, the Netflix original series, not the movie, and you go to 2951, the main character is an artist. And it's like, it said, the describer says, it's a large painting of a man's face. And it turns out that it's Malcolm X. And it's just like, oh, like it just says so much about the character that, you know, that it's Malcolm X, it's not Martin Luther King, it's not a random Black man. I said, and so just having someone who would be able to catch those things wherever they are in the hierarchy, I think, is very important.
Yeah, yeah, cool. So more people in those roles. What about streaming and broadcasting? I don't know of any, Neff. Do you?
I don't either. I'm happy to say that the white folks that I deal with day in, day out in this space are very aware and try every day to do better and to be better. But no, I don't know of any other Black or brown people in the decision-making space.
Yeah. Well, then there could be. There could be, but you know, no description. I'm not gonna know. I'm blind. So what you gonna do? So,
well, I don't think there are, but there's 3 of us right here. So, you know, let's galvanize people.
That is a role that can be done by blind people too, Neff. So
heck yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think we're. Do you all want to mention anything before we move to the Q&A? Matt, if you want to move to the Q&A, I think we got some time. Hopefully we got some Q's, and we'll bring the A's.
Matt off screen.
Absolutely, yeah, and I'm excited to open the floor to these audience questions. So keep them coming in as we move into the live Q&A portion of the program. So to start off with, we have a great question on the topic of narration. It does have to do with the topic of being typecast. So how does one avoid being typecast as a describer? How is it determined when a describer of color needs to be included? And what if a project features an all-Black cast, but you don't necessarily need to sound Black? I'm happy to repeat that question because it was kind of 3 questions in one.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I'm going to tackle the last one where I don't know that in audio description, I think it's helpful. I like listening anytime that the sound of the describer matches the cast, I think is great. So if I'm watching something British and I'm watching a British movie and the describer is British, I think that's great. If I'm watching something that's Dominican and the person, like, I think that's great. If the person sounds Black, as someone who is often told they don't sound Black, obviously, as I'm biased, like, I don't think the person has to sound Black, but I think that that's great. I think that they should. I think that to answer that part of your question, I think if the play features an all-Black cast, I don't know. I think that there's still going to be, and hopefully, as you've heard, as we've been going through, I think that there are many historical and visual elements that may need to be brought to the surface that speak to Black visual culture, as if that aren't necessarily about sounding Black. If Matt, can you just repeat? I'll hand the mic over, but if you could just repeat those other 2 questions, I missed them because I was focused on the last one.
Absolutely. Yeah, so the first one is, how does one avoid being typecast? And then I can repeat the second one once that one's been addressed.
I think avoiding being typecast, I'm curious what Nefertiti and Thomas think. I think I don't know if the question is, how do I as a describer avoid being typecast, or how do you as a hirer of describers avoid typecasting? I would say, again, totally biased here, but I would say let your describer decide. I said, so, you know, if you're coming to me to hire me for a job, as you should, and I feel like, oh, you know, maybe you're always asking me to do X type of jobs, I think that I can accept or turn down the job, or say, oh, maybe I'm not the best describer for this particular role. So I think I would prefer to have that type of decision-making empowerment to decide what makes sense for me to take on and what does not make sense for me. But I also think that there's a difference between having a specialty and being typecast. I like to think, again, at this point in my journey as an audio describer, I think of myself as this is kind of a specialty that I bring to the table rather than, oh yeah, we just call it. I think it would be different if you did one Black play a year and that's all you ever call me for. I said, then, you know, and you're like hiring all these other describers other times. I said, but, you know, I think if you do, I don't know, if you do 100 plays a year and 20 of them are Black and you hire me for all 20 of them, which you could, then I think that's fine. Nefertiti, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I don't know that I've been doing this long enough yet as a professional to be able to gauge whether I'm being typecasted or not. But I know that you know, with one particular company that I'm working with and have a good relationship with, it's only been, you know, Hispanic stuff, Latino stuff, and so I do wonder if there's something to that. But like you, Ashleigh, I rather they call me than give it to someone else who is not part of this culture, you know, and doesn't have the lived experience and all of that, or the accent or what have you. So I'm not sure. Maybe ask us in a year and we'll have a better answer as far as typecast and how to avoid it. I think right now I'm just very proud and very privileged to have the working relationships that I do, and to every day build more and more, you know, capacity and space for that, so that other people can enter into this space, but also so that I can continue, you know, putting food in my belly with doing something that I love. So
I think
yeah.
it would be different if we were only hired in February. Like I know in the, I went to the
Right.
conversation last week and one of the ASL interpreters was like, oh, people only hire, there's one company that only wants to hire me in February when they're doing their one Black play that they, one Black thing that they do. I'm not experiencing that. The organizations I work with, you know, are doing Black things all the time. So, you know, that's, so again,
Yeah.
it's been working out for me so far, so.
Yeah, and I think this person's sort of middle question really gets at the question of the decision makers and trying to help them determine, so how is it determined when a describer of color needs to be included?
They always need to be included.
Yeah, I don't think there's a determining factor. I think we should be part of all conversation.
We'll tell you, just ask us. Ask me specifically, it's fine.
Great. All right, so then I think another question came in from the audience. As a Black American, I notice how colorism shows up in media. For example, often visual media will feature Black people with lighter skin rather than Black people with darker skin. When or how can audio description reflect this seeming trend in visual media? And is it important to the blind community that these types of trends in media be named or highlighted in the audio description?
Yes,
Great
yes, and
question.
yes.
I'm glad. Thank you, whoever asked this question. I saw this when I was kind of flipping.
Wow,
through. I
what
can't wait
a
to get to
great
this one.
question.
Yes, I want to say, I know Nefertiti, I know you talked about something about this. I'm going to take mine first and then I'm going to let you go because I think your example is really good. I think one of the things I actually put in my notes to talk about is I think one of the reasons it's good to have a describer of color, I said, is that I think the issue of colorism is really rife in the Black community. I think that those dynamics are always at play, whether it's overt or more understated. And so I think that as a describer, giving us in a live theater space, especially giving people that information about what the characters look like is very important. I think that you always want to trust your listener to draw conclusions themselves. I think that's what audio description is you're giving your listener the tools to find that information. So while I may not necessarily overtly be like, oh, it's all cast all light-skinned people, and you know, the parents are like dark skinned like me, but the kids look like they're, you know, biracial. I said, which is a visual pet peeve of mine. But as it being able, giving your listener that information without any sort of opinion on your own, I said, I think will be strong enough. For example, I had to describe a play again, where colorism was at the center of the particular piece that I was doing. And so just being very careful at the beginning to really be super clear about what all of the characters look like. One of the characters was in fact biracial and very light skinned. And then all of the other characters were a variety of shades of darker skin tones. And so just really being able to set that up in the beginning, I think was very important. I think that I think that those, again, that's a very obvious example, I said, but I think that whenever you're watching anything, as the question asker has hinted at, those dynamics are everywhere. And so I think as a describer, you want to, as much as possible, give your listener those tools to draw those conclusions themselves. Nefertiti, what about you? What do you think?
So I think that audio description is not the space to come fight racism or colorism or ableism or any ism. It's about providing information, access. And yes, as a brown person, I gotta tell you, I did not grow up really like hearing people like me or even people talking about, within my family we do, because like Ashleigh already said, color and hues and all that is a huge component of people of the experience of people of color. In my own family, we have all sorts of shades. My sister is more of a darker shade. I'm more of a lighter shade, things like that. But I did not grow up, really hearing the media I surrounded myself with talk a lot about that. So it wasn't until I was like in my early 20s that I started realizing, like, yeah, I'm brown. And in addition to my blindness and being female and having the body shape that I do, etc., that plays a part in how people relate to me, how people, view me, associate me, etc. And I think, again, that's because I did not have access to all of this information. So in terms of audio description, absolutely that information needs to be relayed. Color, hues, shades, etc. Very important. Again, audio description is not the space where you come to say, well, they don't need to know that, blind people or whoever's accessing the audio description, they don't need to know that. You're not there to make up our minds for us, right? You're not there to sanitize our experience. You're there to let us know what's going on, and then we make up our minds about it. I think that Ashleigh was sort of hinting at me to talk about an example we talked about amongst ourselves when we were preparing for this panel. There's a show on Netflix called Greenleaf, and not that I was able to gauge this from the audio description, because sadly it is a very, very lacking track. But I was told later on that the parents and the two younger siblings are very dark compared to the main character, the older sister. And it becomes clear later on in the series, no spoilers, but it becomes clear why that is. But for somebody who can't see that for themselves, a lot of this stuff like went over my head till I started asking around. And there's no need for that. There's no need for that. We want to have, again, access. That's the whole point of audio description. It's accessibility. So yes, we want to know that information. The more, the better. And yeah, I think I'm going to stop there.
So I just want to throw in something, and it's not really contrary to what you were saying, Neff, but I think there is an opportunity with audio description when we provide that information about color, about identity in general. I think we are doing something right there to sort of take a stance against white supremacy, to take a stance against ableism, because we're not taking it out of the picture. We're putting it right there. And I agree. I think at the end of the day, it's up to the viewer to determine what they do with that information. That's what I always like to say. Just like a sighted viewer watches it, we don't know what they think about it. It's up to them to kind of see it or analyze the thing, the film, the project. But they do have access to it. And at the end of the day, that's what we want. So denying us access to that is sort of, in my opinion, perpetuating white supremacy when we don't know that there are people of color on the screen. So I'll just add that.
I absolutely agree. And I think that applies to gender, that applies to
everything,
age,
absolutely,
disability, everything. If we don't
Absolutely.
hear it, if it's not represented to us, then it doesn't really exist for us. And we as blind people do not live in a whitewashed world. Like, excuse me, not a whitewashed world, we do. In a colorblind world, right?
Yeah.
We just don't. The fact that we can't see doesn't mean that the world can't see us or that the world's ways don't affect us.
Well, some people do, and we don't have that privilege as
Well,
POCs. We don't have that privilege.
Thank you. That's a really good point. That's a very good point.
Very great.
And I think that's a perfect segue to the next question, which is from a registrant. Do you think one of the reasons it may be difficult to find audio describers from diverse communities is the way they are treated by non-blind consumers? So then there's a parenthetical, behaviors connected with power and privilege, microaggressions, and lack of allyship.
Could you repeat the question?
Absolutely. Do you think one of the reasons it may be difficult to find audio describers from diverse communities is the way they are treated by non-blind consumers? So reasons having to do with power and privilege, microaggressions, lack of allyship.
Treated by non-blind consumers. I guess I'm not clear.
Yeah, that's throwing me.
Or Nefertiti. I said, do they mean non-blind consumers like in a theater setting? I'm hoping whoever asked that question can follow up with us a little bit about who they're, or do they mean like the people who hired them?
Right. That's the way I'm interpreting it, as the person who's hiring them.
Yeah, maybe we can see if that person clarifies in Q&A, but go ahead with your interpretation of the question for now.
I don't know. I guess I don't know enough. When we talked about this in our prep meeting, I said, I don't feel like I know enough describers of color to talk about why the field is the way it is. It feels to me like I was talking to someone who has nothing to do with this field earlier this morning about what audio description was. I think it's already kind of a small field, and maybe part of it is maybe people not knowing enough about it. And then within that, to find people who are interested in doing it, who were able to get trained on it. I think that there are a variety of factors, but perhaps that's also one of them. That's not the experience I'm having. I said, I'm still small time, and I'm always usually hired by someone I know or someone I know of who knows someone who knows me. So I feel like I've been treated great on all my projects. It's just I think my experience might not be the standard one, though. I'm curious what Nefertiti and Thomas think.
Nefertiti,
You're on mute, Nefertiti. Nefertiti, you're on mute.
Hi. Okay. I want to hear from Thomas. We haven't heard much from him.
Sure.
Yeah, please.
I'll be flat out and say that I think it's laziness on the part of those who are hiring, honestly. Because if you ask me to find someone, well, I'm going to go to this thing we have called the internet. And I'm going to look up possibly some organizations like, I had a conversation with folks at Voices of Color, which is all narrators of color. And right now they're not doing VO work in audio description because they weren't aware of what those opportunities are. But, people can go to them. After many of the projects that are on, for example, Netflix or whatever, some of the other streamers, they have the name of the describer, right? The name of the company who did that, did the AD. That's another place to find some of the voices out there. And I know from folks like Eric at IDC, he's always like, hey, if they want to find, I'm always willing to let them know who's on my roster, because he wants people to have as much work as possible. Right. Yes. And that goes for blind and folks of color. Right. Yes. So I think there are many ways, but I think it's laziness. I think that's the default, is to say, I don't know any. Come on, y'all, we could do better. We can really do better, because like I said this a while back, I was looking for a deaf person who was whatever. And I didn't know, I put it on Twitter and I got a response. It wasn't hard. So I'm not going to really accept that I'm not really going to accept many excuses, to be quite honest with you, because I think at the end of the day, they're just excuses. When people want to do better, they do better.
Hear, hear. I can't do better than that. And I don't want to. So
Well, great. That's another perfect segue. You had mentioned a group called Voices of Color. There's an audience member who is curious, are there BIPOC audio describer online communities where people can plug in and develop community? And then this person goes on to say, I recently completed an AD training and I am curious about developing community with other BIPOC describers.
So I can tell you what I've been doing informally is gathering names of people who are either doing the work or interested in doing the work. Because over the last couple of years, I've been asked, hey, Thomas, do you know of any? And I'm like, okay, this is not really my responsibility, but I will do that role for now, right? And so create this list. So by all means, if somebody wants to be added to my list, now I'm not going out and getting people jobs. No, I'm just saying when they say, do you know of anyone who might fit? I'm going to pass on this spreadsheet that says, hey, you go through the list and you contact whomever you want to, and you see if it works out, because I'm tired of the excuse of not knowing people. So there's that. There's communities online, and I'm gonna let Nefertiti tell you about her community, but there's a community in Facebook that is AD, the AD discussion group, I think it is, and they have both consumers and professionals are on that list. There's another one, and I'm terrible with remembering.
I can tell you.
Okay, I'm gonna pass it to Neff.
So I think Thomas is talking about the ADNA, which is the Audio Description Network Alliance, which is also on Facebook. And that is a space specifically for professionals to share what they're doing, to exactly this, hey, I'm looking for XYZ type of narrator or writer. Is there anybody out there? Hit me up, things like that. So for those of us in the field to network. So definitely join that. And then there's the audio description Twitter community. Community is a new thing that Twitter is trying out. And I'm the co-founder of exactly that, the audio description Twitter community. And we have all sorts of people on there, consumers, professionals, people who are interested, people who have no idea what audio description is, sighted, blind, etc. It's a huge, well, it is a growing community, I'll say that. And yeah, so far you have me, you have Thomas, you have Ashleigh, and we have, I think, one or two other people that I know who identify as people of color. So the more the merrier, please join us, and tell your friends, because we need to be represented and doing the representing.
Yeah, and remember that's in all of those areas, right? So writers, narrators, mixers, directors, all of those areas. Keep those in mind.
All of it. All of it.
And speaking of finding these communities, there's also the question of training. And we have an audience question. How does one train to do audio description? I can't seem to figure out a technique, they say. So.
Oh. Well, there are established classes. For example, the American Council of the Blind's Audio Description Institute, run by Thomas, Dr. Joel Snyder?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure, but he is a prominent voice in this space. He has written books. He's, his whole career is based around audio description. He's a well-known entity. And he's, if not running it, then he's definitely a key part of that. So again, American Council of the Blind's Audio Description Institute. And there are others in this space who are themselves professionals and have decided to do some coaching as well. And I think those details you can find in these communities that we mentioned. People post, hey, I have this class coming up and things like that. And then it's up to you to sort of discern if that's someone you want to work with based on whatever your criteria is. I feel like I'm missing something.
Yeah, if you're in the New York, New Jersey area, you need to get over to Montclair University.
Okay, I need to calm down.
Go ahead.
I need to calm down. Okay.
Because this is where it's
Oh.
at, y'all. I'm not endorsing
Oh.
anything else, but I think this is where it's at right now. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'd be remiss if I didn't gush about this. This is Montclair State University, is a big university in New Jersey. And there is this amazing person. Her name is Dr. Maria Jose Garcia Vizcaeno. If I'm mispronouncing that, please forgive me. But she is such an ally in this space. She is a professor, obviously, of Spanish studies, but she has taken audio description to such an established level where she has an entire semester, an entire course dedicated to audio description.
Truly immersive.
Yes, super immersive. I had the great privilege of presenting there last month, and I did an hour lecture and then a hands-on workshop, and these students are so engaged and so with it, and it is because of the leadership of this professor. She gets it. She gets it, and she's wonderful at explaining things and encouraging people. And again, I mean, how big is that? She's made an entire semester, an entire course out of audio description at a university level. Yeah. That's impressive, and that's more of the kind of thing we need. Also, if we're talking about that, San Francisco State University has audio description mentor things that they do. I'm a part of that. Emerson College just did an experimental films course that I was a speaker at. So, you know, it's becoming more and more prevalent. I don't know that these are classes that you could just show up and sign up for, right? Like you have to be a matriculated student, but these things are happening at like on a scholarly level, which is so exciting because it's legitimacy, you know, and awareness.
There's also the AD retreats, AD training retreats, I think it is, Colleen. And I know one of the teachers now is Liz Gutman from IDC, and Liz is a fantastic writer. She's somebody who gets it. And if she doesn't get it, she's gonna figure it out. She's gonna talk to the people she needs to talk to and get it. So the fact that she's working with Liz now is probably something that I'm like, oh, okay, that's probably good. So I would look into that as well.
I think it's very good. And Colleen just announced yesterday on Twitter that she is working. Oh, she's here. Oh, hi, hola. Okay. Maria Jose is here, Thomas. How exciting. Okay. Yay, you're wonderful. But Colleen Connor announced on Twitter yesterday that she's putting together a course of an audio description training retreat specifically for blind people trying to break into the audio description space. So that's really exciting because you do have these other trainings, but a lot of them are catering towards the writers of audio description, which is fine. That's important, right? Without the writing, without the script, you don't have anything. But there are some circumstances and some considerations that are specific to blind people in this space. So I'm really excited that Colleen is thinking about that.
Well, we have about time for about 2 more questions, I think. There is a question from someone who is asking, as someone who identifies as white and non-disabled, what advice do you have for effectively pushing back at companies who book your services, either descript or narrate, yet you know you're not the right fit for the role? So for instance, a project centered on a particular group or race or experience that you do not identify as. So if you're in that position, how do you push back at the company?
Yeah, I think we talked about that, but I think it's having that conversation by simply pointing it out, saying, hey, I don't feel I'm the right person for this because, right, fill in the blank, and suggest highly that they seek out someone else. And if the pushback is, oh, we don't know anyone, well, again, you have these other areas, you have other people that you can contact. Like I said, I'm keeping this list, this running list of folks. But if you yourself know of someone who's right for that opportunity, pass it along. I think it's just about having those conversations and not being afraid of the conversation. You know, the fact that, you know, I was asked one time about someone who had an opportunity to do a very Black show, and they asked me if, you know, if I felt any way about that. And I'm like, well, the fact that you're asking me tells me that you feel some type of way about that, and you are correct. So what I'm saying is that you are correct. And so maybe you should have the conversation with your director and suggest someone else. I don't know what they did, but the fact that they asked, you know, and once you know, well, you know, if you did the right thing after that, you know that. And so you have to kind of deal with that on your own. But I think, yeah, there you go. Have the conversation.
Agreed. And, you know, not that it's your job, but if you do happen to know people, you make it your business to know people and to uplift people, whether they be Black, brown, blind, what have you. Then maybe if you decide, you know what, this isn't the best fit for me, but here's somebody who I think would work really, really well. You know, that could go a long way towards helping somebody on their way as well.
Absolutely.
Great. I think a neat one to close on might be, what are some positive examples you've seen of audio description getting it right?
Oh, that's a great question. There's more and more of those every day. Thank goodness. But I want to say, written by Liz Gutman and voiced by, is it Bill Larson, Thomas?
Bill Larson, yeah.
Yep, The Harder They Fall movie on Netflix gets it right. I think that The Crown gets it right. Oh my goodness, so many, and of course I'm blanking. You guys speak up here, please.
I know it's so hard. I said it's so easy when you have a bad one. You're like, oh,
yes,
I'll remember that forever. But I think that audio description is like good design. Sometimes when it's good, you don't always notice it in the moment, and so it's harder to go back and be like, oh yeah, that was actually pretty good. I feel like a lot of I think live theater things. I think that I've heard. I'm trying to think. I feel like there was a show. I think that there are little moments. I think I said Black Lightning. I feel like I saw some parts of it. I'm trying to remember if that was a good one. I think what I'm gonna do is I am going to go through it. I'm gonna write a blog about all the good ones, and then I'm gonna share it. And then
That's cool.
I will feel like I'm not a jerk who only thinks about negative
Love
things.
it.
But I'm
So-
saying something positive in the world. So, but I want to hear what other people think too.
Yeah.
Now I was going to say,
Pin, another one. Sorry, just put
consider
it
this in your blog, because I think sometimes when we start to mention the things that are good, they're very specific to BIPOC. And the thing that I think there's a level of good that I want to see when it's not specific to our stories, when we are characters within larger stories and they're generic, right? And they continue to make sure that they describe in that realm, because that's the one that I see that there's lots of problems still. And I'm not trying to be,
right.
Donnie Downer.
No,
but I'm just trying to be real and say,
it's real.
they're like, yeah,
That's
it's
right.
real. And so, it's one thing, it's pretty obviously, hey, it's a Black movie. They Black, like you know what I'm saying? But it's a little bit harder when we get lost in the general movies and films.
I think that's a very good distinction to make. Very important.
And then also,
I was just gonna say, when I mentioned The Harder They Fall, that's a Black movie.
That's a Black movie. Yeah.
And it's a beautiful movie, but it is a Black movie. So
yes.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, this is not the original question of good examples, but negative examples. I just thought about it when Thomas said it. I said one of the things I was thinking about in terms of when there are people of color in stories that are not directly about people of color. I said, you get into then quality control and racially charged language. I said, I know we talked about that in our prep meeting. I was watching a show where all of the bad guys, I said, on this particular show happen to be people of color, and the describer described them all as thugs, which I just really thought was a problem. So again, I think that making sure that we don't get lost, that we're using the right types of language as to describe us as people of color wherever we are in the story, I think is very important.
Absolutely.
Here, here.
Matt appears at top left.
Wonderful. What a compelling conversation. Thank you to all three of you. We're going to need to bring this excellent program to a close. We'd like to extend a special thank you to our three presenters. So Thomas, Nefertiti, and Ashleigh. Thank you for this invaluable discussion. Thank you also to our accessibility service providers and the CCAC production team behind the scenes, making this all happen. And mostly thank you all for joining, offering your support and your questions. We would also like to acknowledge the Illinois Arts Council Alliance for their support in the ICAN initiative. In the chat, you'll find a link to our feedback survey, which we invite you to complete. You can also find us on social media via the links in the chat as well. And if you need more information about CCAC or to review archives of our programs, visit chicagoculturalaccess.org. And I also wanted to extend the opportunity to our panelists and moderator to share any way that people can reach out and contact you.
Ashleigh, you want to go first?
Sure. I'm pretty easy to find. My name on social media is always my name because it's always available. So my email address is my first and last name at gmail.com. My LinkedIn page is also a good way to reach me as well. And then soon I'm going to have that blog and I'll be sharing it, and then you can reach out to me there.
Excellent. And me, I'm at Nefertiti on Twitter. So the first three letters of my three names, Nefmatoli on Twitter. And that's my email as well, nefmatoli@gmail.com. Please be in touch. Would love to hear from you. And yeah, follow the audio description Twitter community. It really is a great space all about description.
Very cool. I want to thank CCAC. First of all, I appreciate the invitation. This was fabulous. My name is Thomas Reid. You can find me at TS Reid on Twitter. And you can also find me at readmymind.com. That's with the podcast Read My Mind Radio. But just remember, spell it R to the EID, like my last name. All right.
Yes.
Thank you, Matt.
Great.
Thank
Thank you, everyone.
everybody.
CCAC is going on break for summer, but stay tuned for updates on our next events in the fall. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Happy
Thanks.
describing.
White text on a black background. BIPOC Accessible Service Providers, Part 2, Audio Describers. Presented by Illinois Cultural Accessibility Network. For workshop resources and more information, visit chicagoculturalaccess.org. Speakers, Matt Louderback, ICAN. Moderator, Thomas Reid, audio producer, podcaster, and voiceover artist. Ashleigh Braggs, audio describer. Nefertiti Matos Olivares, audio describer. Workshop accessibility, real-time captioning by efficiency reporting, ASL interpretation by Pro Bono ASL. Video editing, captioning, and audio description by BridgetMelton.com.